Good morning. Welcome to the Private Protective Services Certified Trainer meeting. Today is September the 17th of 2021, and we're going to start this meeting at 9:36 a.m. We're a little bit behind due to unforeseen circumstances. So, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead. We just had a new member walk in, so let's give him a moment there to take his seat. And then we're going to go ahead and do the roll call. Curtis Brown, Dustin Madison, Jack Bird,
here.
Leroy Ferris,
Here.
Frank Gaddis, Blaze Lane,
Here.
Angel Rodriguez,
Here.
Donald Gregory,
Here.
January Farrell, Frankie Lax.
Here.
We do have a quorum. All right, we need to do adoption of the agenda. Has everybody had an opportunity to review today's agenda? If you do, we'll go ahead and take a roll call. Jack Bird, for approval.
Approve.
Leroy Ferris,
Approve.
Blaze Lane,
Approve.
Angel Rodriguez,
Approve.
Donald Gregory, Frankie Lax.
Approve.
Motion carries. Now we're going to do a roll call vote to approve the minutes from the meeting from January 11th of 2021. If there's no discussion, Jack Bird,
Approve.
Leroy Ferris,
Approve.
Blaze Lane,
Approve.
Angel Rodriguez,
Approve.
Donald Gregory, Frankie Lax.
Approve.
Motion carried. Now I'm going to turn the program over to continue discussion for the armed guard portion of the committee meeting over to Jeff Renfrey.
All right, good morning, everybody. Appreciate each one of you for coming this morning and discussing this. We're just to kind of recap where we are. We did finalize the version for the unarmed training, and so now we're working on the armed training. I've made a little bit of headway recently. I've been processing applications. We've been kind of busy with that, so I have made several changes to the presentation this week after I sent it out to you all, but as I explained to you in the email, it is a perfect example of a truly rough draft. It's just, it's got blank slides in it and things like that. So it has places to put new information, and obviously we can change anything. I handed out to each one of you a couple of items, and basically this is the course outline. So I envision of having an instructor's manual that we can hand out to everybody that goes along with the PowerPoint presentation. And so this is going to be kind of part of that manual, the instructor's manual. So basically it is an outline that has a targeted suggested audience, any prerequisites to the course that we feel like. Obviously, if you're going to be an armed guard, then one of the prerequisites is the unarmed training or the general guard training. And I realize that doesn't necessarily have to come one before the other, but before a person gets registered or licensed, as most people call it, they would have to have both of those sections. So it lists those things. It talks about some of the disqualifying occurrences or offenses that might cause a person to be disqualified. And of course, as we've pointed out, we have to review those cases now on a case-by-case basis and apply the Fresh Start Act. And some of those things, there may still be a possibility that a person can be registered afterwards. Then there's a course description, and then there are goals and objectives for each different part. And then on the other handout is the same exact thing for the arm training, 8 hours of classroom firearms training. Of course, there will be another one of these for the 4 hours of marksmanship training. And then I plan to create another one for the 4 hours of renewal training, which will be very similar to this one. So I sent all these to you in electronic form, so you can, if you like to have something in print, you can go over this and make notes on it. It's yours to keep. And then if you'll get back with me if there's something that needs to be added, changed, worded differently, or anything to that nature, then you can submit it back to me, and I'll make the changes, or I'll at least entertain your thoughts and ideas. So basically, when I'm creating the PowerPoint, I use this as a guide to go by. So if one of our course goals, for example, is comprehend the definition, roles, responsibilities and authority of an armed security guard, well, I need to make sure I've got a slide in the presentation that defines what an armed guard is and what his or her roles and responsibilities are. So this sort of is my roadmap when I'm putting the presentation together. So and so I can see this as being a good instructor manual down the road. An instructor can look over this and familiarize himself or herself up front. Well, these are the things, these are the important takeaway points that we want to make sure that we get, and I should find this either in the PowerPoint presentation, or in the case, Blaze, if you're not going to stick to the PowerPoint presentation, whatever method you choose to get this information out, whether it's a handout or whether it's a Post-it note that you stick in front of everybody, or whatever it is, that'll give you an idea of what you need to prepare ahead of time for the way that you plan to do that. So with that in mind, that's what I do. It's kind of hard to put one of these presentations together. When you get over 10 or 15 slides, it's like, did I say that? Well, I meant to say that. Well, yeah, I did say that. I said it twice. Oh, wait, I've said it 3 times. So then you have to go back and decide which slides to take out, or in the case of the Force Continuum, there is a sentence on every Force Continuum slide that says the most important thing is de-escalation. So they're going to see that about 9 times in a row. So if you see it once, it may be important. If you see it twice, it's probably important. If you see it 3 times, it's definitely important. If you see it 9 times, you probably want to stick pretty tight with that one. And so I think in the climate that we're in today, we should teach that and strongly emphasize that that's real important. And I will say this about that: the bad thing about that, the de-escalation part, as a police officer or a security guard, we always start out at level 1, which is officer presence. Just us being there, dressed up in a security uniform, or maybe it's plain clothes, but just your presence. We always start at level 1. Well, the unfortunate thing is the adversary sometimes starts at level 5. They don't play by the rules. And to escalate from level 1 to level 5 may only involve a split second. and decisions have to be made. So it puts everybody in a hard position when we keep hammering the point, de-escalate, 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 when the other guy starts out at the most escalated point and again doesn't necessarily have to play by the rules. And so that kind of puts everybody in a hard spot. But we're still going to teach that and the importance and emphasize the importance of it. So with that said, I think I'd like to just kind of breeze through the presentation. Does anybody have anything in particular maybe that you've looked at or anything that you want to discuss right at this moment? We'll just run through the slides and we'll try to go through there real fast. If you have something, and at any point going forward, always if you send me something and say, hey, I don't really think that this is applicable, or this is a great point, but it could be said better, always refer to the slide number. And that way it'll be real easy. You know, if we're all talking about slide 58, then there's no question as to whether or not I'm making a change to the correct slide. So just focus your attention to the board, and if I can figure out now, since I've changed from my home office back to the office, my computer doesn't like that move. It just goes crazy. All right, so there's already been a comment that we need to make a change to slide number 1, and instead of saying Private Protective Services Regulatory Board, I'm going to change that language to something. What am I going to change that to?
You're going to change that to underneath the Department of Commerce and Insurance. You're going to put Detection Services Licensing Program, and under that you're going to put Private Protective Services.
Okay, just leave off Regulatory Board. All right.
Mr. Winfrey, Ms. Cody,
Yes.
We would need to make that same change to the 4-hour general training as well, because that's
Yes,
exactly
we will.
how it's listed.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll change it.
And I've discussed this with Angel. He has agreed to help with that, so it'll be real simple. We'll just do a find and replace function, and it'll automatically do what we want it to do. So we will work on that. And in case I've discussed with you committee members, either individually or as a group, we've discussed the name change, and I may have sort of misled some of you a little bit about this name change, but I'd like to clear that up just real quick. We are now under a large umbrella that's called the Detection Services Licensing Program. So that's the big canopy. And then underneath that canopy, we have alarms, contract security companies, proprietary security organizations, private investigators, polygraph examiners, and private protective services. And under private protective services, that's got our armed and unarmed guards and certified trainers. So that's kind of what the hierarchy looks like now. So we are still PPS, but we're part of the Detection Services Licensing Program. Does that kind of make sense? And if you go back and notice when you look at the Tennessee Code Annotated, the word Private Protective Services is still throughout the statute, very, very present. So that didn't really go away. It's just all underneath a different umbrella now. Is everybody with me on that and kind of clear on that now?
Whenever I attend meetings, it's the alarm systems contractors, it's private investigation and polygraph, and then it's private protective services. You still have private protective services is still under 6235. And 6235 143
43.
is the one that adds detection services licensing program. Well, all it's done is taken every program that we have and combined it all under one budget. But you still have your private protective services.
They just added a section to the law. We used to go up to section 142. Now we have a section 143 that just kind of created that umbrella detection services licensing program, and then everything that was other than locksmiths. We used to do locksmiths, and it was deregulated in sometime in May of this year. So locksmith is no longer in the picture. It's deregulated, but everything else is kind of business as usual.
So is this going to change anything with the core program where it says board and you're going down to private protective services? Is it going
You'll still go to private protective services. That was a little bit something I was a little bit concerned about, but when you're teaching that in class and you spend 5 minutes and say, okay, folks, here's how you apply. Go to core, look for private protective services, and then look for initial armed or unarmed guard. So that is not going to change. I was a little concerned about that at first, but I don't think we'll have as much of an issue going forward as I may have anticipated at first.
If somebody asks about a security guard, they're under private protective services. Always have been. Nothing has changed. All they've done is combined all three of our programs together under one name, one big umbrella is all they've done.
So adding the name to the PowerPoint is just a legal matter, or can we
We need to
leave
make
it
sure
off?
we use the correct names.
All right.
Just for clarification.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing when we've talked about sending out correspondence is we just want to make sure that people know, when they go to core or anything else on our website, that they're finding the correct area to make applications, send their renewals, and things like that.
It's now going to be under the Detection Services Licensing Program, or is it still under Private Protective Services?
I believe on our website we're still leaving it as private protective services.
So my only pushback, and again, if we're adding clarification by adding words that only serve to muddy up the waters, is it really clarifying?
Right. That's a good point. I think if we just if we leave private protective services on there, I think that helps. Remove regulatory board. We could probably leave it as Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, private protective services. If we want to put detection services licensing program, that's fine. We probably need to keep private protective services, since when you go into Google, you type private protective services, it takes you to the private protective services page.
And that's what I was getting at, is that if it just said Private Protective Services, then truly nothing has changed. That's clarification. Once you start putting Detection Services Licensing Program and someone else, feel free to jump in, that's just now where are they looking?
I know when I'm sending out letters to anyone, I'm putting both names on there just to make sure that we're keeping it consistent. I think we could probably just remove, this is a PowerPoint, just remove regulatory board, leave private protective services, and be fine.
I've made a note of that, and that's a good point. And I'm like you, Blaze. I want to make sure that when somebody goes online that they know where to go to and what to do, because we get a lot of phone calls in our division forwarded from the securities division, which has to do with stocks and bonds and annuities. And so, a lot of people, well, I want to get my security license. Well, they're thinking security guard, and so they end up calling, and they get somebody up there, and they're like, oh, you want to sell insurance? Like, no. So we end up getting a lot of those phone calls where somebody was either misguided or they just, they thought security. Well, I'm on the right track. Well, no, the securities division is a totally different animal. So
The way I understand it is nothing's changed. It's just that they added the word detection services for budgetary reasons for y'all, not really for us. It's for y'all's total budget for all of the different
programs.
that you have. That's the only reason that
That's
word
the
was
biggest
added.
change. That's right.
Okay, all right.
That's,
And
that's the
I
primary
will
change.
tell you, we're working to. Well, one thing I have tried to get with the internet is if a person is sitting in Oklahoma and they're going to move to Tennessee and want to be a security guard, I want them to type in security guard, go straight to PPS. Not have to go through all those. If you've been out on our website, you have to go through several steps to even get to where you want to be. So we're actually, if you want to be a PI, it should take you straight to the PI database.
Instead of having half a dozen checkbooks, you got one checkbook now.
That's what I'm
Okay.
trying to go to.
So the bigger question is, did you get more money in the budget? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out if you got more.
No, there's not more. You just put it all together. You have the same amount of money. You just put
I'm
it all
just
together.
asking.
We do take donations here if you want. That was only a joke.
Let's start passing around that collection plate.
I didn't know how that state math worked. I'm gonna grab a drink.
Kind of unrelated, but related at the same time. Like you were saying, Ms. Vest, when people go search out on the internet as to where to go, there's when you go to do your live scan fingerprinting, you actually have to select the Department of Commerce and Insurance versus looking for private protective services. So I don't know if that's something that could be improved or changed or just somehow communicated, because that's part of the process to get a license.
Right. Now, that is a private entity. I can discuss it with them, but that is a private entity.
A question on that, because before you even get there, they do ask for that code.
And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work?
There all day long, that ORI code on their website, it does not.
Well, no, you don't use it. From what I understand, you don't use the ORI code. You have to have a different
Identigo
code.
has changed. They don't.
That's right.
They don't go
They
by
don't
the
accept
ORI anymore. They go. They've got a special armed and an unarmed. They call it a service code.
Yeah.
And
Get
I
that
have
in.
those taped to my computer monitor at home. I can give it to you if you'll remind me or send me an email.
If we could put, sorry, go ahead, Angel. I was just going to say, if we could put that in there, it would circumvent the need to say, I don't know, and then go down to the Department of Commerce and Insurance. And I've looked for those codes, and I have scoured your website for them and called, and this was back when Brad was still here. And I had them at one point, no idea what they are, but if we could put that in the PowerPoint, that would save a ton of time, because it'd be an easy reference. We'd be able to hand it out. They would already have it, type it in, and be done.
So, Jeff, you can do that on that slide, right? Add that. Okay,
I can,
good point.
I can go back and put it in the unarmed presentation.
Yeah.
And I can duplicate it and put it in here too.
Perfect, Angel.
Again, if you see it once, it might be important. If you see it twice,
Well, I concur, because that's probably one of the biggest questions I have from my students about their fingerprinting. And they say, well, they're telling me I need this, and I don't know where to get that information. So that'd be a big help. Thank you.
We've already accomplished something this morning.
yeah.
Good.
All right, so I'll add that. So, as we go through here, I'll go through kind of quickly, because there's I have 194 slides right now. So, but we won't spend a lot of time on anything. But and some of them are blank, some of them are reserved to just go and stick stuff in if we need it. So. So, as you all know, the authority for us to train is found in 6235-118B, or actually B deals with the armed part. This is kind of the catch-all where we can just say it once and not do it on every slide. You think that's okay, Jesse? Just tell them that anytime a reference is made to the commissioner, we're talking about the commissioner of Department of Commerce and Insurance, unless otherwise specified. And then everywhere else through the presentation, we'll just say Commissioner. I think in the unarmed presentation, everywhere we said Commissioner, we put in parentheses Commissioner of Tennessee Department of Commerce. If it's okay with everybody, we'll just kind of go back to this idea. Just state it one time at the beginning, and then every time that we refer to the Commissioner, this is who we're talking about. And I don't think there's anywhere else that we talk about anybody else's commissioner in our presentation. Right. But I think it's still good that we say this, because if we were going to talk about the commissioner of the Department of Safety or whatever, for whatever the reason, we can specify that's who we're talking about. Okay, so this is our course goals, and this is going to tie back in with this one page that that I gave you on the 8 hours of classroom firearms training. It's actually at the top of page 2. And again, I use that as a kind of a roadmap. So I make sure that somewhere down the road I put in a slide that takes care of that goal. And if y'all think there's another goal that we need to add or clarify or anything like that, just make sure you let me know. And it'll either go on this slide or probably the next one. There's probably two slides with this. So if we added one, it would go there. If we added 3, it would make another slide. So pretty self-explanatory. This is the course overview. So basically, when we teach this course, there's 3 sections. In some cases, I think I've labeled them 1, 2, and 3. In other cases, A, B, and C. And that just needs to be cleaned up. It'll be one way or the other. And I think it's A, B, and C in the statute. And if it's A, B, and C in the statute, that's what we need to go with. Just so that if somebody is inclined to read the statute to kind of see where we are, they'll know that, well, this says section B. Oh, this is B, handling of a firearm. And I think this is just a repeat slide. So there again, this is rough. So probably no. So all right. So what I did here is I put the goals just for section A. So it may still need to be there and stand alone, but we can look at that and let y'all take a look at it later and let me know what you think.
Winfrey, on the prior slide, one of the things I thought that might be a good idea to add in, or kind of like we've done with the
this one
on the previous in this one, yes, sir. We did cover a lot about the use of force, and we're going to adopt that in the ARM program as well. What I didn't see in here was anything. I think we should do the same thing with powers of arrest. That should be reinforced again as well. That was my thought.
Okay. I'll just put to reinforce. I'm going to put the lack of powers of arrest. I'll just add a slide to that. Hey, Mr. Ferris, can you move that thing, that placard? Yeah.
Oh, so you can see.
Yeah, I can't see Angel through there. And
Who's using it?
Well, I know, but
Concealment action.
and there's a slide in here about that, covering concealment. I read lips, and I can't see his lips moving. I can hear something, but I can't hear that very well. All right, so I'll go back and I'll add. I can probably add something to this slide, maybe another bullet point or something, and put on there that the Force Continuum will be discussed and things of that nature. Arrest powers. All right, so when we get so these goals would be specific to the section A, and I think we probably, even though that very first rule or that first goal sort of doesn't fit in with the laws and statutes and things, but I think we need to start out the class, and because I used to be bad to carry a backup weapon in my pocket, and in my other pocket I carried an extra magazine full of ammo. I mean, that's what we do, right, in law enforcement, those of us that are trained to do that. And I would sometimes find myself going into a classroom and I mean, it's just there. I mean, it's like when you get in your car, the steering wheel's there, right? So I think we need to emphasize right off the bat, hey, if anybody's got any live ammo, check it back in the car. I don't allow anything like that in my classroom if I'm teaching a firearms course. It's like a sponge in water. Ammo finds its way into the chamber of a firearm. The gun loading ferry is present, and it'll get in there if the two are in the same room. So I put that on there. If anybody disagrees with that, then we can discuss it or move it or whatever. But I think we need to take that up pretty quickly in the class and establish that right off the bat for safety reasons.
Just as I mentioned, when I'm teaching class, I don't carry my firearm in the classroom, a loaded firearm. I carry a cert gun so I can demo situations. So I tell them even I do not carry a loaded firearm. And I think all you have to do is YouTube, shootings in gun classes by both instructors and students. So I think that's certainly really important, not only for the fellow students, but for the instructor.
Well, and that's kind of why I put that term in there. There are virtually no authorized person. So I don't care if you're a 12-star general and you're the instructor, you probably shouldn't have any ammo in there because it'll find its way in. Somebody will get it and, well, what does this do? How does this work? Pretty soon they got a loaded firearm. So, Blaze, you had something?
Oh, when it comes to the no live ammunition stuff, I think it's great that it's up there, but I would either highlight it in red or make it its own slide. I find personally that it's so important that it needs to be more of its own thing.
I think that's probably a good idea. I'll make a note. Add slide.
Because in the course that I teach, it's its own slide.
Add slide for no ammo in class.
I think if I recall correctly, at the Department of Safety gun permit class, no ammunition in the classroom is a bullet point all by itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll just make a slide all by itself and just say that, and that'll be once we've established that we're in the right room with the right class, that'll be the first thing we put up there. Now that you're here and you're at the right place, make sure there's no live ammo. So we'll just make that another slide. All right, so you just continue to read down. You see the goals there, and that's what we hope to accomplish. There's this may be a and this needs cleaning up, so if I've got something up here twice, then that's just me.
Mr. Winfrey, in this
Yes.
section, this is where I was thinking this would be a good place to talking about earlier hours of arrest.
Okay.
One of the landmark cases related to that would be Miranda, so it should maybe be referenced here too.
Okay.
Thank you.
So slide 9. Miranda, you said?
My only concern about adding Miranda, this is where it would be a little bit strange, is if you're not a law enforcement officer making an arrest in that capacity and someone, you don't have that same obligation under Miranda. So if I make a citizen's arrest on Jeff, if I think that he has committed some crime and he just unloads and starts telling me all these things, is that going to be excluded in court? And the answer is probably no. So I think that Miranda can be added, but we may need to be careful about how we put that in there.
We can, I can get with you, Jesse, as to, we can mention it and how that it either does or doesn't apply, or
The way I instructed is basically we're not required to read Miranda rights to anyone as a security officer.
That's good. That's good.
Okay.
I wasn't sure where you were going with it. I was just thinking, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole and confuse someone to make them think, do I need to Miranda? Because, you hear it in Law and Order and things like that, so they probably are familiar with the rights. But that's good. I think if we keep it simple.
Sometimes even law enforcement's not sure. I mean, you can talk to somebody for a while without Mirandizing them, but once your questions start becoming investigatory, that's when you better Miranda up, because
I think we can do it quickly, like you were saying, with just not required to Mirandize them. I like that.
So if I make a bullet point or another slide or something, we'll just put it in around in this area. Got several objectives here. And this looks like just another duplicated slide. So again, I've got to clean it up. So here, I want to make sure that I'm used to the program, the firearms programs that I have created in my career were always law enforcement based, and I want to make sure that I don't leave anything out that is unique to the security industry, because basically, whether you're a law enforcement officer or whether you're a security guard or whether you're a private citizen, when you can shoot somebody, when you can use your firearm against a threat, it's pretty much the same. It's the you got to be in fear of your life or someone else's, and it doesn't matter what brought you there. It might if once you get in some kind of litigation, but for the most part, it's the same set of rules apply. So I want to make sure that if there's something that's unique to the security industry, that we make sure that we put it in there and teach it.
Thing I observed is we have two deadly force laws in Tennessee, and I'm quite familiar with both of them. 39. Tennessee versus Garner, 3911-620. But 621 is really the deadly force law for a private citizen. I think there needs to be a little more emphasis on that, and let them know, obviously, that they're not law enforcement and they cannot shoot a fleeing felon. There's all these circumstances that incorporate that. But I just phrase it this way. If you read the deadly force law in Tennessee, it basically tells you you may not use deadly force. It tells you under two cases that you can, and both of those happen to be a defense of self or a defense of a third person. So I stress a lot on that the deadly force law says you may not use deadly force to an effect arrest in any way, shape, or form, and you can't point a gun at somebody. You can't. That's aggravated assault. I go through all that. So I stress, I say what 620 is, but you're not that. So it's kind of like not Miranda. You don't do that. But 621 is the crucial there, that they have access and means to, do serious bodily injury and or death, basically. And that reverts back to self-defense. So I just think somewhere that is a key part. Somewhere there, that is a key part. Sorry.
I like the way that you phrased that too, because I think deadly force is, or we're talking about self-defense, it's a defense.
Yes.
It's not you can use deadly force in these circumstances. It's don't use deadly force, but if you did, here's your defense to it. And,
Right.
and I think that's a better way to phrase it. I like that.
To tag on what Mr. Ferris is saying, I think we should also have something regarding liability and vicarious liability on this slide as well, that you're representing essentially all of the folks could face legal action if it's not handled properly.
I do have some slides in here that goes into that, but if you feel like we need to maybe highlight it, bullet point it or something, we can certainly do that. And I will probably be calling on Mr. Ferris to help me word a slide or two there.
And and I'd meant to send that previously, and I apologize. That was my, not being very well at being organized and all this craziness that's went on the last few weeks in my life. But I do have some of that I can provide for you, and I apologize I hadn't done that. But I'll be happy to.
We'll get to it.
Sure, yes, sir.
Jeff, if I could just offer one other little tidbit since we're kind of talking about deadly force, is maybe somewhere else within this PowerPoint, it may already be there, I just haven't seen it yet, is just to let the security officers know they cannot use deadly force in defense of property or stolen property. Because we do have in Memphis folks shooting at people who are shoplifting Snickers bars, and they run out the door and then they go out there and shoot at them.
We probably shouldn't be doing that, right? Okay.
I love my dog more than I like most people, and dogs are property, by the way. So that's something.
And I do have some slides with that in there. So once we get there, we'll evaluate whether or not it looks adequate or not. I think these two slides are pretty much the same. I'm not sure. I don't see what the difference is right now, but
Title at the top.
So I put the definition of an armed security guard in there. That's one of the first things, that I feel like we should do is we're going to teach these people to be an armed security guard, so we're going to define what that is. Well, the best place to get that definition is right out of the statute. And that's the very first term that's defined in the statute is what an armed security guard is. So we put that in there. And then where do we get the authority to carry a firearm? And that comes from Section 125. I have some of these have a lot of notes in them too. A lot of the slides. These don't seem to have any, but. And then I listed the rule, Section 0.15, that specifies what kind of firearm that we can carry, and I highlighted in red the calibers that are available. I've had one certified trainer on a couple of occasions to qualify some people with a .22, and I called him and I said, "You know better than that, surely." "Oh, I thought that wasn't right," but anyway, he did it anyway, and he went back and changed it, so that's okay. But so I kind of highlighted that.
May I ask what a standard 12 gauge shotgun is?
You can ask. I don't know if I can answer it.
I guess may I ask what a non-standard 12 gauge shotgun would be?
Well, that's the language that's in the rule. So if we need to change that down the road, we need to consider that. But that's what it says, and I don't know what that means exactly.
I'm just, for my own clarification, if someone brings me a shotgun, it's 12 gauge, at what point do I delineate, yes, you can certify with this, no, you cannot? What would be my criteria is all I'm asking? Or is it just 12 gauge?
In my opinion, if it's chambered for 12 gauge, it's good to go.
Right.
I had somebody, one of the team members call me one day this week and ask me if an AR-12 was legal. And I'm going to be honest with you, I thought I was a gun enthusiast, and I know I am, but there's a lot of stuff out there I've not heard of. So I looked it up on the internet, and basically it's an AR style, looks like a rifle, but it's got a great big old thick barrel on it, and it's a shotgun. And I said, well, yeah, if it's a 12 gauge, it would be legal. I mean, it's a semi-automatic shotgun. So as far as I can see, if it's a break action, pump action, semi-automatic, as long as it's chambered for a 12 gauge, not a 20, not a 10, not a 410, not a 28, not a 16. If it's chambered for a 12 gauge, I think it would be legal.
Now, may I Sorry, go ahead.
I would think that the reason that they put that in there years ago was the sawed-off factor, the pistol grip factor, when all that was probably put in the statute. So I think probably what they meant by standard 12 gauge is a full shotgun instead of a sawed-off type pistol type shotgun, I would assume.
Now, we do have to clarify because sawed off implies an illegal action, whereas short-barreled shotguns or even AOWs or any other weapons that are still chambered in 12 gauge would be fitting the bill but still staying on the legal side. So,
I think even a pistol grip shotgun would probably, I don't know that we could single that out. If it's sawed off, however, it's going to violate ATF rules, and that alone is going to be a no-no. But, so I think as long as it's a 12 gauge and it's not illegal based on ATF rules, I'd say it's probably good to go.
and the only thing that I was going to add is we have very specific caliber classifications there, but then we just say 12 gauge. Is there any restrictions on birdshot versus slugs and buckshot, because it's not really spelled out?
Well, somewhere in our statutes, or in the, I think it's in the rule. We specify that it has to be 9 or 12 pellets of double aught buck only. That's the only thing we allow. No slugs. And I'm going to be honest with you.
No slugs.
I'm a little concerned about that myself, because when you pull the trigger and you got 9 pellets, it looks like ball bearings that come out of a bearing. I mean, you're responsible for all 9 of those.
But you're saying no slugs?
Well, that's what the rule says.
I believe it's not
Buckshot
listed.
only.
I believe it's not listed. It doesn't say no slugs. I just don't believe it's. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I read it, but I think it doesn't mention slugs.
The rule actually doesn't mention slugs. This is part of the problem that we've actually run into recently, because we've had questions about whether or not you can put a rubber bullet in a 12-gauge shotgun, and whether or not that would still be a standard shotgun if it's loaded with rubber bullets instead of birdshot or buckshot. Part of the confusion, I think, is the rule does not specify. It actually doesn't say if you can't use a slug. It doesn't say if you can't use buckshot. It doesn't say if you can't use birdshot. It just says a standard 12-gauge shotgun. I think the way that we've been interpreting that is that a standard 12-gauge shotgun would carry buckshot or birdshot or slug. It wouldn't carry a rubber bullet. And I think part of the reason that we're looking at things like that at this point is if you've got someone who thinks, I've got a rubber bullet, I've got less than deadly force in here, maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they don't remember that. That's one thing that we've had some concerns with. So I think the rule actually probably could be clarified further, or the commissioner could approve it without having it added to the rule, since we have an approved list. But it's unfortunate. Point blank, actually not on the list. It's not further defined.
I think I remember where that is now. I think we have a suggested curriculum, and I think that's where it specifies buckshot only in that suggested curriculum.
Right. But in the rule and in the statute, it doesn't say one way or the other. So
I think that's right.
So I think it's going to be a strange issue if you have someone who's carrying a shotgun that is it a standard 12-gauge shotgun, or are they certified in a standard 12-gauge shotgun, but they're carrying it with something different? I think sawed off, obviously, we're going to say that's not a standard 12-gauge shotgun. But if you have a different type in that birdshot, that's where the question there. Standard 12-gauge shotgun is.
So I qualify with a Taurus judge with 45 long Colt. Get certified with that, and then every other round put 410 shotgun shell. I mean, yeah, you get those type of questions all the time. However, it doesn't say 410 shotgun shell. At some point, some of this does need to be brought in today's modern ammo.
Here's another one for you. Y'all are certified trainers. All of you are armed, except Angel. I come to your armed guard class and I bring my 454 Castle. It's 45 caliber, and it's a revolver. You're not gonna let me qualify with it? Based on what?
Yeah, based upon my discretion, if someone's going to carry something like that in security, probably don't want to certify 'em, probably,
Well, you probably don't, but
because they're probably not all together.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say yes. I would let you qualify because my shooting course would go ahead and weed you right out.
well, it probably would. I probably couldn't shoot as fast as you wanted me to, because part of the time I'd be trying to get my arm back on the target. So yeah, probably not. But I'm just saying, I don't know if we want to go there or if we do want to go there. But that 45 caliber could bring on some, issues. It's something to think about.
I think
I
we
agree
need,
with you,
excuse
Bud.
me, Jay, I think we need to remember all this was written back in the 80s.
That's the
So
whole
it's
point.
the rules that
Yeah.
we need to work on. That's not what we're doing right now. Yes, we do need to sit down and look at all the rules and get them more modern. So these are all good suggestions, and this is what the input we're going to need from you when we do start writing the rules.
I agree with that, because back when this was written, a 45 was either a 45 ACP or a 45 long Colt. That was it. They
357 SIG now,
Well, yeah.
357 Magnum now.
right.
So
And so and of course the 357 SIG has
who
been
carries a
approved.
32 anymore?
It's been approved. The 357 SIG has. It's just not in the rule. It's just an addendum to it. But so yeah, those kind of things have changed over time. So the industry has moved out and left this stuff in the dirt. And so anyway, I made a big deal about this on this slide. So I actually added the 357 SIG and the 380. As you all probably know, they're both 9 millimeters technically, so it was already approved in one sense of the word. But I did put in there that we do not authorize rifles. I still have a lot of people asking that and want to know what it would take to get him to authorize them, and I don't know the answer to that either. Yes.
I like to be the bump in the road. It does specify no authorized rifles of any type, and as we have clarified with standard shotgun completing an entire array of shotguns, it's, you know where I'm going with this, pistol caliber carbines. It is a rifle platform that fires your 9mm, your 45, your 40, or 10 millimeter. So
If it's not, that's when you go to the ATF and say, what is a rifle and what is a handgun? If it's a handgun,
it states firearm. It does not say handgun. It says qualified in the firearm chambered in 9.45. The firearm is a standard 38, 32, 357, 9, 10.
go
A
back.
security guard has a qualified pursuant to such use of a firearm. Everything is a firearm.
It says revolver or semi-automatic.
It says revolver or semi-automatic pistol. The firearm is a standard, those calibers, revolver or semi-automatic pistol.
So, again, be the bump in the road. I have a pistol caliber carbine that has a stabilizing brace on the end. It is technically considered a pistol according to the ATF.
As long as it's a 38 or a 9mm or 40, then it's legal.
All right.
Now, I'm telling you, if I go down here to the farmer's market and everybody down there at Archangel is carrying that, and they're all standing around with it on a sling around their neck, I'm probably going to go across the street and eat it, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm going to be scared to sit over there and eat if that's the kind of security that they feel like they need. But is it legal? I don't know that we have anything that we could prevent that. As long as, if the ATF says it's a pistol, then it's a pistol. And if it's one of the calibers that we've got approved, then it is an approved pistol. Should we be carrying it in security? Maybe or maybe not. I think that's another battle for down the road, but probably not what we're here for today. But I agree that we've got some. Again, the industry has run off and left this old stuff back in the dirt, and I don't necessarily think it needs to be changed to accept it, but maybe it could. I don't know.
I think at this point for the training, I think if we focus on that, it's right. We focus on this is what the the statute says, this is what the rule says, and because I think possibly either the rule could be changed or additional firearms could be added or modified based on the commissioner adding them separately. So I think it could have a few different options. So I think if we focus on including the current rule and statute, that's probably the best way to go about it.
Again, keep these things in mind because there will come a time when we're likely to have to visit this issue somewhere down the road.
Well, I've been asked several times if people can qualify with PCCs. So kind of like your 45, who would qualify you? I do get this question, and so that is why I bring it up now for clarification, because the answer is needed now, not later.
I concur. I don't know that it's not better to go ahead and start regulating and certifying people with rifles as opposed to leaving it arbitrary and open-ended and playing the we don't know because it's in this gray area. Because the same question he has is the same question that we're getting all the time. Just because you have something that the ATF qualifies as a pistol, even though it clearly looks much more like a rifle, is sling mounted, has a drum on it of 100 rounds, yes, that would be legal for you to carry under this law. I don't know that we want to turn and not focus on this now, because if we don't, I feel like we're going to live with the precedent that we set.
We got an interesting question then, I guess, to follow that up. So say I come to you, I'm going to get firearm training. I'm not necessarily saying it's for an armed guard training. I want to be trained in shooting different firearms, whether it's for a guard card or not. And I say, I might be interested in working as an armed guard, so please certify me in a standard shotgun, but I'd also like to know how to shoot a rifle. And if you clearly tell that person, as a security guard, you can't carry a rifle, but are you still going to train them to certify them to be able to use a rifle legally?
If I could offer, I do certify people with rifles, but that's through the NRA.
Correct.
I do not certify anyone with a rifle under the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Private Protective Services, strictly a shotgun or the pistols that Jeff has highlighted here. But I do get those inquiries all the time, like the AR platform pistol that has pistol caliber ammunition. Can I carry those? I do get those quite frequently. And I do think that at some point we'll have to maybe bring the statute or maybe just the wording up to today, because, like you mentioned, Jeff, the firearms advanced and what they're coming out with so quickly that something that's 20 years old or older might need to have the English or the language cleared up.
I think you could certify them on any weapon then, that they could be certified for NRA purposes, and then be clear to them and say, here's what the statute says for security guard purposes. Therefore, for the certification I'm sending to Commerce and Insurance, it's only going to show this 9mm on there.
Right.
I mean, I think if you included the other information on there, we could. Do we kick that back typically and make them? Do we send them without having the information? Then I think that then I would just include for our purposes for Commerce Insurance this information that's on there. But if you want to certify them for outside purposes for personal use, I think that's fine. But we're kind of
don't send that certificate to us.
Yeah, he
will
wouldn't
not accept it.
He wouldn't send that certificate to us anyway. But the only thing he would send to us is is something that had this on it. If he certifies somebody as an NRA training counselor as a certified rifle, I don't care. We don't need to know about that because they're not going to carry it for.
You carry it on post.
And he would need to tell them that, you know, you, as an armed guard, you
Oh, I
can't.
do.
Yeah.
Basically just saying we need to stay in our lane based upon the statute that was passed, you know, in the 1800s, whatever this was.
Right.
And what they're talking about
When you were born.
is if they want this changed, because counselor is saying stay in our lane as trainers with this statute to work with. If they want this changed, they need to get the legislature to change this. It's pretty simple. And then, you know, just have them change it. Get with the legislatures to have them change it.
Well,
That's the only way to fix it. Am I correct?
that, or if it's a firearm approved by the commissioner. So the Department of Commerce and Insurance commissioners, I mean, if you've got, you know, you think that there's a firearm that should be added, you know, you could submit a letter to the Commissioner for Commerce and Insurance and say, I'm a certified trainer. I've been doing this for this long. This is what I think should be added. The commissioner may or may not add that firearm, but if you think there's a reason as an expert in this field, I would welcome, you know, you helpful.
I have one more point. One of the things that I think has bothered me, and this actually happened, I shouldn't, I don't even want to admit it, but I am. One of ours bought this device that the gun actually drops in, and it has the stock, has a barrel that mounts on it. So technically the firearm still in its nature is a Glock 9mm, but when it mounts onto this, or mounts inside of this device, it now has a sling, is capable of having a stock or a brace, if you want to get technical. We don't know that, and we certified them for this, but I don't want to be the trainer on record when this guy goes out here with a drum and a sling and a Glock mounted and something that looks like a short barrel rifle. Is there any thoughts? I mean, that's troubling to me as a trainer.
Well, I think if you, as a trainer, if you fill out a training form and you submit it to us and tell me that that this person qualified with a Glock model 19 or 17, 9mm, or 43, whatever it happens to be, you got the make, model, and caliber, I think you're covered. Because I can take my Glock model 22 and drop a 22 caliber barrel in it and get that magazine that goes on it, and I can shoot 22s out of it. Well, if I did that, I don't think you should be held liable for that, even though you may have qualified me this year with that gun as a 40.
Plus, we're teaching them to present from a holster, and now they've modified the gun so it doesn't fit in any kind of holster that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean that tomorrow there won't be, and there may be one I'm not aware of, but they're on the range presenting from a holster, and they're reinserting the gun back into the holster in I'll call a safe and ethical manner. That's what we're looking at. And now they've altered the gun. I think we have nothing to do with that.
Right.
I think you as a Blaze just told me a minute ago that if I brought my 454 Casull that I probably couldn't qualify with it. Well, if I bring my Glock in one of those modified stocks, could I qualify under your rules with that?
You're talking about the device he's talking about, or the PCCs?
Like what he just described. I don't know what you call it. I know I got a friend that's got one, but I know what it's called. I know what it is.
No, I would not qualify with allow anyone to qualify with that, just because inherently it doesn't reclassify the firearm per se, but any sighting system that you put on there, you're no longer attaching it to the slide itself. Therefore, it's inaccurate. It's too technical to get into, but essentially, there's no way to guarantee accuracy. So I would not, based on that.
But when they qualified with us, they would show up with
Yes.
the regular firearm, and this would all be done after the fact because it doesn't change the fact that what's the function is the firearm inside of the device.
When you send that training form in, you got to keep a copy for 3 years. So all we got to do is pull that up, and you say, and maybe if he tells you he's got that, you might just put down there in the comments that this is a standard Glock 17 9mm. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we can go back and hold everybody liable for things that are outside your control.
Just food for thought. I mean, we had this happen on the disaster deployment to Louisiana. Someone showed up with one of these devices, and I got a picture of it, and not good.
I'm not surprised
So.
at that, but all right. Let's move on through here because these are good discussions, and I think we need to look at them. But let's make sure we don't get too bogged down with it, because we can't change those things. As Mr. Lax has pointed out, there's a different group of people that do that. This is actually part of the rule, and I just put the whole rule in here. I didn't make any of this up. This is copied and pasted from the rule. Now I did put this special note here, and I think this is something that as an armed instructor, you need to be telling the people. With an armed security registration, you can work an unarmed assignment. But just because you're armed, just because your permit shows that you're armed, your registration card, or because you have a state handgun carry permit, that means absolutely nothing if you are assigned and hired for that unarmed assignment. You are not to carry a firearm. And then the rule also talks about the less than lethal, or I think we still refer to it as non-lethal. It talks about all those things. And somewhere in I think it's in the rule that says the contract security company will keep a record of the less than lethal or non-lethal devices that you're qualified with. So that's not something that you turn in to us. If you're a certified instructor for baton, chemical spray, or stun gun, or electronic control device, and you train somebody to carry those devices, you'll see that there's no place on the training form for you to submit that to us. It's either the rule or the law specifically states that the contract security company will keep those records on their employees.
Jeff, is there a research component for these that's stipulated in either the law or the rules once they get certified?
Not to my knowledge. The only thing I know of is like ASP or whoever does ASP does the collapsible baton. Whoever does the big OC spray, I think they have rules that their certification runs out after a certain time, maybe. But I'm not.
That's basically what I've been telling my students is that as far as the state's concerned, they're not required to be recertified. Their department might, or like Safari Land or ASP,
Right.
may require research for them, but the state doesn't necessarily require it. I just wanted to confirm that.
Again, the rule just goes on to, here it says prior to carrying a baton, they have to be certified by a trainer that's been certified by the commissioner to train in the use of whatever that device is. And this says the same thing with regard to chemical spray. This one says the same thing for a stun gun. And again, we know that we probably need to change that to an electronic control device. And then whether it's a stun gun or a taser, it fits that general category. This is just the rule. I reiterated this. If you see it once, it's important. If you see it twice, it's probably even more important. So I put it up here again. Yes.
On the less than lethal devices, is there any, I didn't see it in there, clause that says your company and the client may add additional restrictions to the use of those tools, even if you are certified? I know that's something that I cover, just because there are certain places that will do that.
I don't think I put anything in there other than just what the rule says. I mean, you could certainly teach that if you're aware of it. So this is our use of force continuum that we decided to use. I'm going to be honest with you. I did not like this thing at first, but the more I looked at it, the more I sort of got to liking it. So anyway, this is it. And so this talks a little bit about the beginning stages. And you notice the last sentence, it says de-escalation should be the focus and objective of every difficult or potentially hostile situation. So there it is. You've seen it for the first time. See it again. And this just goes through and talks about, this is where we talk about the levels. And of course we teach that everybody starts out at level 1. No force, just your presence. Notice again, de-escalation should be the focus. Level 2 talks a little bit about that. Level 3, again, the last sentence, de-escalation should be your focus. Intermediate weapons, this is your less than lethal weapons. I even went back and figured out how to add it to here. Or maybe it was here. I didn't have it there at one time. So on every one of those slides, that sentence about de-escalation is there. So again, I think in the climate that we're currently in, we do need to teach that. And again, I do know that our security and our police force is in between a rock and a hard place because, we're teaching everybody to start out at level 1, and the bad guys get to start out at level 5 sometimes, so still, we're going to teach that because we think that's important rather than going directly to the firearm to take somebody's life or cause them serious harm. I know this has already been defined, so I'll take this out.
Mr. Winfrey?
Yes.
This is the section. I thought it would be really good to add in the liability aspect right after you talk about use of force so that people are really clear that we want you to do this, and this is the consequences of you not doing this.
So after use of force, I do have some liability type slides where the statute talks about even though you may be justified in doing certain things, there may still be criminal charges. There may still be civil charges. There's even some statutes that say you can be exempt criminally if you do this under these circumstances. But it clearly points out in that same statute that there's no forgiveness for civil liability. And all that's in here. It just may not be where we want it, but I can move it around.
Can I go off the record for a moment?
Sure.
Well, it's still recording, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, but
I'll go after.
Okay.
okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but
I see for the win.
So this is where I reiterate, and again, I think I just duplicated these slides for something, and I need to clean them up, but. So this is where I started talking about deadly force, which is right after the Force Continuum. And so I don't know if we want to move some, but those slides are in this little section, but I don't know how close they are, so we'll just see how they are and we can move them around. I think I got some of this. Blaze had sent me some information, kind of what he teaches, and I sort of put some of that there, I believe. Well, this is where we talk about deadly force. Okay. All right. Let's take a break. We'll be back. It's 10:51. Let's come back at 11:02. I learned that in one of my LinkedIn training classes the other day.
Elvis.
You think I'm kidding?
He was his security officer.
Yeah,
You think I'm kidding?
No, I'm not. I believe you. I have no doubt.
He bought that for my daddy. My daddy was in the Army with Elvis. Look at my web.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order here. So this next section is where I start mentioning everything about deadly force. I went to the Code of Federal Regulations. I was just looking for some things, and so I wrote down what the Code of Federal Regulations defines as deadly force.
But Jeff, who uses this?
Who uses this?
Yeah.
Certified trainers.
I mean, you said you went somewhere and got this information out, so somebody's reading the federal regulations. So who uses this? Law enforcement or any person or?
Defining deadly force.
It's the federal law. So,
It's the federal definition of deadly force.
and trying to look at the state statute would be helpful, I think, to at least. So they'll
Again, this is where we need to take a hard look at our rules and start making adjustments. And we also don't define an employee. I mean, put that in the back of your mind. The alarm board defined employee because there were so many problems with 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Part-time, 1099, whatever. So they defined what an employee is. So that might be something you might want to consider.
You're saying you want to consider defining employees?
Yes.
Well, the last thing here, of course, I'm sure you all teach this too, but under the federal statutes, they specify that you do not fire warning shots.
Federal statute, federal government, current commander-in-chief, I have been duly informed that firing a round into the air of a shotgun is perfectly acceptable. Is that changing?
Well, I just know what I found here, so.
So we're going to take the federal definition and put it in ours?
Well, but this is where I think it makes sense to include. I think Jeff's right in including it because there could be situations where if there's a federal investigation potentially, you could be subject to federal liability. Don't define it in our very least training them on. Here's what the black letter law says. It may be the federal definition, not necessarily the state definition. So, state of Tennessee may not be investigating you criminally under this specific definition.
I think it's great to include it. I'm just throwing a few things out.
What if you've got a armored car driver that's down here at the federal bank and they get into a skirmish, that's going to end up
That would be federal, right? And that's what I'm saying. There's going to be
Right, that would be
situations
federal
where
under
this
his job.
specifically-
Yes, right. That's entirely different.
But I don't think we need to necessarily delineate and say,
Right.
if you're a guard here, you're going to be subject to federal jurisdiction. Here, you're going to be state jurisdiction. Here's both. Deadly force is defined it this way. Probably how we would define it in Tennessee as well. If you go back a slide.
Well, so this next slide, I mean, unless have misquoted or misunderstood something, I do have a deadly force definition out of the TCA.
That's
good.
under 602. That's right.
Okay, so is this what the Department of Safety uses too?
Yes, it should be.
Every department should use this. It's part of the Tennessee Code. So it's defined here as it means force that is intended or known by the defendant to cause or in the manner of its use intended use capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. And I don't know if some of these statutes need to be, I was reading them and I don't know who does what in your training. So, and I may defer to Jesse on some of these, whether or not we need to put that particular, like 603, confinement as justification force. I don't know if we need to talk about that or not. But if we don't, we can always take it out.
I'll put in which part?
There were several of these statutes in this section that talked about it, so I didn't know if we need to include them all or not. So I was just going to kind of defer to you as to whether we think that it should be in here or not for security training.
I think it could be helpful. I mean, do you all typically train on when you're saying detaining someone or trying to confine?
Absolutely, it's a part of our continuum, or we're going to take, not part of the continuum, it's part of care, custody, and control, which is what we would teach afterwards.
That's typically, how do you typically train this? Talk about the code and what it looks like.
We do talk about the code, and we also talk about just the care model where we now revert back to taking care of them and everything else that goes into it. I just think that's a great prelude into it.
Make sure they quite familiar with technically what they can't do,
right. And
obviously leave, and if not free to leave, as part of the authority to do that. Not to do that. That's the way I do it. Just
that makes sense. Everything under Part 6 here is for all the justifications to deadly force. So I think, as Angel had pointed out earlier, there's we're not supposed to use deadly force, but I think kind of keeping that in the back of your mind of maybe when you're teaching about confinement, I don't know if that's more in the unarmed guard training portion or if it belongs in this section. It could go.
I don't think I have most of this in the unarmed.
We got one portion in the unarmed that we do talk about force. It's in the chapter definitions under 39, 11, 106, Part 14. Force is just generally defined as means compulsion by the use of physical force or violence and shall be broadly construed to accomplish the purpose of this title, which is what's in the code.
I think that makes sense. I think, you could have a situation where an unarmed guard is using deadly force without using a firearm. So I think that is something, if we wanted to put both of this section specifically in both of them so they're aware of that, that could be helpful. It's probably better to keep at least in the armed portion. It's just an interesting one to put in this section talking about self-defense or deadly
Mr. Ferris and I were talking right before. I think this would be especially helpful.
Slide 48, I'm going to make a note that is it the up to Jesse, or y'all have some specific things that you feel like we need to insert in there?
I think under the confinement too, at least in mine, I do have the false imprisonment statute, just to make sure that they can read the differences between that and what the TCA is for it.
I think that's an important distinction as well, because under this section, we're specifically talking about confinement being justified use of force as part of that defense of deadly force. You know, if you use deadly force, and there's false imprisonment, you're looking at other types of assaults. You're looking at other types of civil liabilities as well, potentially. So I just think being clear of saying that force confinement. Talk about that.
Just to clarify too, and apologies, didn't mean to interrupt. We did include it in the unarmed portion. It's on slide 240, where we talk about the same exact statutes in there, along with reckless injury of an innocent third person. So,
Okay, so what we're saying that this is a test question. We need to make a note of this.
Correct.
Sounds like it's going to be a test question.
Know the number of the false imprisonment?
3913-302.
3913-302?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I don't know that's in here, so we can add that.
That would also, in mine, I mean, I know I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but in mine, we also specify the kidnapping statute. So if you remove them, not only have you, if you false imprison them, keep them in the same place, but then if you were to place them in the back of a vehicle and now transport them somewhere else, now we've committed a separate statute, a separate
now
offense.
not only are you illegally confining them, but now you've kidnapped them.
Right. And so I specify all three of those in ours.
Okay.
tag on to what he's saying. We included on slide 241, right after that, 3911-605, that civil remedies are unaffected. So even if they didn't do anything criminally wrong, that you could still get sued civilly.
Okay, 3911-604, this is where, we, I think Blaze and I were talking, during the break, and, if you shoot somebody or shoot at somebody, you may have been justified in doing that. But if you miss them or you shoot through them and you injure or kill a third party that happens to be standing there, then you're still probably going to be in trouble. And it says third parties such as innocent bystanders may be rewarded in civil court, even though there were no criminal charges filed. So this is, and I maybe should put that in quotes or something, but that was just kind of me thinking out loud. And so, we talk about that up there at the top, and then I'm kind of thinking out loud here. So if we need to present that some other way, so it doesn't look like it's part of the law, we can do that. But I think that sentence, that little paragraph right there, is pretty good to get somebody thinking. You read that up there at the top, and it's like, well, what exactly did that mean? Well, what exactly that means is if you shoot somebody else and injure an innocent bystander, then you may be held criminally, or you may be held civilly liable, even though you're not held criminally liable. And then this 605 goes right to the heart of the matter. You know, you may be justified in what you did, but it doesn't mean that you won't be subject to a civil suit. And then 611 through 616 and 620 and 621, it's talking about, you know, unless it's provided specifically in those, it just goes in and talks about that. So I included that because I felt like that was a little bit important. Public talks about public duty. A little bit about that. This is the self-defense statute. You're defending a third party, third person. Protecting life and health. This talks about protecting property. Statute up there. Protection of a third person's property. This one needs to be spaced. Again, I've pointed out that this is a very rough draft, so if I'd seen this one while I was going through it, I'd go back and respace things. I put something in here about the use of deadly force by a law enforcement officer. I don't know if we want to mention that, but a lot of times, I know we're security folks are not law enforcement officers, but sometimes you have to, kind of like Mr. Ferris was saying a minute ago, sometimes you want to tell people what they can't do or shouldn't do. Well, sometimes I think it's a good to make a comparison, as an example. So that I went ahead and put that in there.
Where I'd put 3911.621 is after that.
Harris, you need to speak into your microphone,
I'm sorry.
please.
So this is where I'd put 3911.621 is right past that, past the 620. In my personal opinion, I mean, it may
Looks like I skipped 621, so I need to I'll make a note here.
Basically, what does 21 say, Lever?
Basically, it says you can use the amount of force that's reasonably necessary to effect an arrest, but in no case can you use deadly force if you're not authorized to do under the law. And then it gives two exclusions to that, and they're both the self-defense and defense of third-person laws. So I make a point of just telling the student that basically the deadly force law says you can't use deadly force, and you can't use deadly force to effect an arrest. However, you may use deadly force if your arrest were to turn into a self-defense situation. And I have a lot of little bullet points and examples, but that's kind of in a nutshell how I do it. Just make sure they're clear that that's the last thing they want to do, but it's got to be self-defense, and they have to articulate excess means, opportunity. I won't go into all that here, but go into a lot more detail of what that really means.
So they've got to articulate in court that they reached that moment where they were in fear of imminent death or extreme bodily injury.
Jeff, if I could offer, because I think this is a good point when you're pointing out what a law enforcement officer's authority is, but you might want to consider, if you putting down at the bottom, maybe in red, that security officers or security guards are reminded they are not law enforcement officers. That way you kind of make sure you're telling them, this is what police can do, but you ain't police.
Okay.
That might help.
There's room to do it, obviously, right there, so.
Okay.
We could go back just a moment with the definitions as well to the prior slide, because I think there's some things that we added in the unarmed section that might apply here. On slide 242 of the unarmed, we went through 3911, 611 self-defense. On slide 243, because these are just the broad definitions, where it says deadly force under 3911, 611 Part 4, deadly force means the use of force intended or likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. Some of the things that Mr. Gregory was bringing up, I think also needs to be brought up here, because it talks about nuclear power facilities and things like this, where it would be okay to use deadly force to protect that facility in those critical environments.
So just maybe reiterate here the same thing as slides 242 and 243 from the other PowerPoint.
I think if we were to take that whole 3911, 611 with all the definitions and put it as a prelude to all this, that might be a better way for it to flow. That's what I was thinking.
All right, I've made that note. Okay, so what I did here is this must have been long and arduous, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty long. So in the notes, I just copied and pasted the entire 3911-622, and this is justification for the use of force, exceptions, immunity from civil liability, civil action. So, and then I just made the note, what do we need to put in this slide? And so we're sort of talking about this right now. Well, I think I can go back and insert what we need to have here with some help from some of the committee members. And here I did put in red there at the bottom that you can't use deadly force to defend property. Can't shoot someone for stealing or trespassing. Made some references back to 614 and 615. Basically, there again, really the only time you can use deadly force, and to me, whether you're a civilian or a policeman or security, deadly force is pretty much reserved for you've got to be in fear of your life or someone else's life or immediate bodily harm. Now, there may be something about felonies, but even with Tennessee versus Garner, or Garner versus Tennessee, whichever way it is written, that was a case where deadly force was not justified because he wasn't able to convince a jury that his life was being threatened. Now, he may have tried to do that, but apparently the court didn't go along with it. So, and these are just some kind of me thinking out loud. Again, you cannot use deadly force just because somebody may be doing something illegal. Can't use self-defense if you consent to the unlawful force used by another. I mean, if you invite somebody to come take a swing at you and they do, it's probably not good to want to use that as a reason to shoot at them afterwards. And of course, you can't use self-defense if you are the aggressor.
I think it'd be good to bring up too, if they give any sign of surrender, or that even if you would have been justified to use deadly force, if they do give any sign of surrender, that now you're not justified anymore.
I'm just going to put slide 64 includes sign of surrender, and I can write something on that slide to that effect. This is where I started talking about the Castle Doctrine. Again, I will yield to you guys that have this stuff already in place as to if you have a better way to say it or something that needs to be said. But this is where I started talking about it. One thing, the term Castle Doctrine is not really used in our code or our statute, but the ideas behind it are found, and that's in 3911 611C, and this is what it says there, and then I just copied and pasted exactly what it said. And there's some exceptions to the Castle Doctrine. And I think I went back and I remember the first time I ever heard the word curtilage, and I'm thinking, is somebody mispronouncing something? I didn't know what that was. So I've taken the liberty to, I think somewhere on the next slide or two, I've taken the liberty to define what that is, because, you know, I've told y'all before, there are no dumb questions except the ones that you don't ask, and then you find yourself needing to know the answer and you didn't ask it. To me, that becomes a dumb question. So a lot of people are going to go, what's curtilage? You know, isn't that what little Miss Muffet was sitting on her tuffet eating her curtilage and whey? No, it's really curds, but it kind of makes me think of that term. So I did go down and define it, but it defines what a residence is, a dwelling, business, and vehicle. Talks about stand your ground. Tennessee does not require you to retreat. I may not have defined somewhere. I put down the definition of curtilage, and I don't. It may pop up here out of place, but I'll probably go back and put that in there just so. Or I could put it in the note to define what. Maybe I did do that. It is. I put it in the note.
We do get that question during training.
Yeah.
Are we a stand your ground state? We get that question. I get that question all the time. Counselor, some people say we are, some people say we're not. You know, any suggestions on how to answer that for these instructors here today? Are we a stand your ground state, Counselor?
I think the way that we look at self-defense, not a specific law that says
you don't have a duty to retreat, basically.
Once I chase you inside your home or in your curtilage, where else are you going to go?
You have nowhere to go.
You have nowhere else to go, so you're kind of backed into a corner, so to speak. And then I did define curtilage. It's in the notes on that slide. Curtilage is the area of land occupied by a dwelling and its yard and outbuildings. And then it says actually closed or considered as enclosed. So I'm not sure exactly what that part of the definition meant, but
Safety. The Department of Safety has it in their presentation also. They add a few more words to it. I'll be happy to send that
absolutely, yeah.
to you.
I just think it's good to
I'm going to use that same definition.
Yeah, I think Cody and I have talked about that. We want to look and see what safety is using in some cases, and you know, there's no sense in us coming up with a new wheel. You know, we'll just use the wheel that's.
Some verbiage about the area that's commonly used by the occupant of the house, and a lot of other stuff that's not in what you just said. It may be in there, but I'll send that
Sure,
to you.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I just looked it up on my dictionary app, and that's what I wrote on there. I mean, if you tell somebody it's the land occupied by the dwelling and the yard and the outbuildings, that gets it a whole lot closer to not knowing what that means.
I just wonder though if we're getting too much in the weeds on this. For the most part, when we're looking at Castle Doctrine and coming into your brought it up and are providing service public would not be allowed, then I think that some of this may be more applicable. I'm just not sure if you're providing services for a business. Obviously, at some point, a patron becomes trespassing and no longer allowed there. So you would have a duty to get, or a contract duty at that point as a security guard to remove that patron from that facility. Strange situation. Or use of force, and there's other ways. Thinking of, for an example, are providing services security guard at a bar, and a patron becomes disruly. Person under the Castle Doctrine, person lawfully someone a little bit confusing. Other uses of whether that's I don't know how much we need to actually spend on the Castle Doctrine and talking about, especially with residents. I mean, you could be providing security services at an apartment complex, but the person who's going to be utilizing that Castle Doctrine is likely the person who is in their apartment and has someone who's trying to break in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense to me, because the Castle Doctrine, in my mind, was designed as a man's castle. That is your home. That is your property, and you're able to defend the intruder. You don't have to retreat. I don't really think, in my personal opinion, it has anything to do with the private sector security.
State law, it's always meant under case law, it means your business, and they've actually put that word in the law now. It says your business. It says that in Tennessee 3911-611.
Which is true, and that's why I made that distinction of saying if you're getting to that point where they're no longer someone who is invited into that business or a facility where they could not be there lawfully. But if it goes from, if you're a business where they can lawfully be there, they're now no longer lawfully allowed there because of their behaviors, you're trying to get them removed. At that point, that is where Castle Doctrine would come into play, because you're saying, hey, this person needs to leave, I'm trying to remove them. But we're also trying to train security guards to use less than deadly force and try to remove that. That's where I think you're talking about officer presence. You're talking about using confinement potentially, or other methods to get them to remove. If someone breaks into my house, I may not be using all of those methods to stop that person, because that's where it's going to jump from that level 1, essentially, if we're going to use our terms, to deadly force, because there's almost that assumption that if someone kicks in my door, they're here to cause me bodily harm.
There's no expectation of de-escalation if you're at my home. I don't have to de-escalate if you're breaking into my home or my car. But here, I think we're making we're drawing a big assumption here that the Castle Doctrine is going to apply to us, because I think any attorney is going to simply tear down and say, you're a third party. Right. You're an agent hired of that property, but you're still another third party. So did the doctrine apply? But if we do this, I think we're setting a precedent, too, that we're going to live with, where we say there is no expectation to de-escalate, because effectively that law says we're standing our ground. There's no expectation of retreat. There's no expectation that we'll have mitigating factors. No. I mean, you break into my home, I don't have to go grab my less than lethal. I don't have to. I'm not going to. So I don't know that we want to put a lot of that to rest on, just because I feel like it's going to push people to, the law says, and then you're going to have 50 people Google Castle Doctrine, Tennessee, and now we've got an unsundry list of, we have a whole bunch of internet attorneys running around.
What I teach, if I can add just one more thing, is if it's open to the public, that's different. But when the business is closed, it's very clear in the law that any occupant of that business falls under the Castle Doctrine. If someone forcibly enters that business, that automobile, that home. So if the security officer is working in a locked warehouse and someone forcibly enters, it is under Tennessee state law, which happens to fall under the umbrella of the Castle Doctrine. That's just, that's the way I teach it. But I tell them, if you're in a, working in the phone repair store, it's open to the public, that does not apply. But if it's after hours and it were closed, it could apply. I don't even say it does. I just said it could be under that. That's just my.
And I think that's a good way to draw the distinction of saying it could apply, because there are going to be those situations where, if someone is breaking into a store and they're saying, well, I wasn't going to cause anyone bodily harm, I was just, here to steal something. I think that's where the Castle Doctrine, for the most part, is under case law. So the judges are going to be looking at that and saying under that fact. So I think being clear of this might apply, but I think maybe we just, for the purposes of training someone, training a guard, I think maybe paring some of it down and really focusing more on that use of force.
I think that's it. If we're factoring to the lowest common denominator of who we're teaching, I mean, to echo your point, are we sure that they're going to understand the distinction between, are they ever going to think about it in the act? Is the business closed? Is the business open? Is this Castle Doctrine? Or is this, what authority am I drawing this weapon and using it? I don't think they're asking that question.
So I think even in the unarmed arena, you're going to have the same issue, especially at the bars and the clubs, in that they're a direct employee of the club. In most instances, they're a proprietary security officer. They're not contracted through someone else. So I agree that I think we should pare this down a little bit.
So if I may jump in, because I'm piggybacking. The way I teach it is I gloss over the Castle Doctrine portion, but I hone in on the exceptions of where Castle Doctrine would not apply, and that is basically anyone who has a right to be there. And so I kind of gloss over that and say, all right, now as a security guard, you may think you have the presumption of imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury. However, remember that there's always that employee that can come in late. There's always that cleaning crew that you didn't know about. So I use it as a teaching moment to say, kind of in the use of force, these are the things you have to watch out for. This is why Castle Doctrine may not apply to you as a security guard. And so therefore, your first approach should always be the de-escalation. Use the voice that God gave you. Say something, because there are all these instances where it does not apply. So that's kind of how I approach this particular area.
I think that sounds like a good idea. So I've got a note here. May not need to put much emphasis on the Castle Doctrine. Get with Jesse, clean this up, and Leroy. Maybe hone in on the exceptions, Blaze. So I'm going to be calling you guys back.
Yeah, maybe I missed this, but effectively, if we are going to say that they fall under Castle Doctrine, does that not immediately arm an unarmed guard?
Automatically arm a citizen in your
It would.
house.
I mean, effectively, that arms an unarmed guard.
It does not, in the sense that you're trying to say that the firearm is the only use of lethal force. What we're saying is that unarmed guard could use lethal force, such as a baton, for example, or a pencil if you decide to attack a person and plunge it in their eye. It's just saying that the force itself is allowed.
And I think there's two different distinctions there, too, of if you're working an unarmed post, you shouldn't have a firearm on you. So if you're working unarmed and for some reason, say you have a firearm in your car or not on your person, I guess it's in your locker or something, if your employer's fine with that, and you use that firearm in self-defense under the Castle Doctrine, we can use that. That's going to be a defense for criminal acts. That's not necessarily going to be a defense for any type of penalty from us saying, hey, you were an unarmed guard who was carrying it armed on post, or maybe for other civil issues. So I think that
I'm in uniform. I'm wearing a security guard uniform. I go get the gun out of my locker because the guy's breaking in.
Right.
I'm unarmed, and I get the gun. What law? What am I doing?
So the self-defense law would protect you. However, you'd still be subject to all of the penalties from not the act of self-defense.
But
So-
we approved the Castle Doctrine, so I mean, it's in our training. So there's no penalty, right?
Go back and read the definition of an unarmed guard.
So I think we're looking at we're looking at one, do you have penalties from the Department of Commerce and Insurance because you were working an unarmed, if you weren't licensed to work as an armed guard, but you were, working as an unarmed guard carrying a firearm, potentially there. Are there civil liabilities potentially there? This is specifically just for self-defense of criminal acts. So I think Leroy had mentioned that he talks about that a little bit. I think maybe paring down the Castle Doctrine, maybe again reiterating, you're not supposed to use deadly force, but if you do, here's defenses that could help you. Just so that way we're not saying, go ahead and use deadly force, here's all your justification for it.
That makes sense?
No, I'm tracking. I don't know.
Again, I think the reason that you're having a hard time is because you're correlating deadly force directly to the firearm, because you keep going back to it's in my locker. It's not about the firearm, it's about the use of force. So an unarmed guard would still be able to use deadly force that is not a firearm under the Castle Doctrine, but if they did use a firearm, that use of force would still be acceptable under the Castle Doctrine. However, the fact that they use the firearm would still be able to be penalized.
Right. I want to take away that penalty. Is if we condone it and we teach it, we put it in our slide, like we need to go ahead and acknowledge that in certain exigent circumstances that's commerce and insurance isn't going to have any bearing on it.
And you're correlating the firearm. Take away the firearm.
Well, that's the only thing we're regulating in the distinction between unarmed and armed is the firearm.
Exactly. So if they're unarmed.
Right. So, but if we're going to teach this, because it's in the unarmed too, is it not? No.
But I think we're not going to say.
I think you got two different situations. What he's trying to say is a justification to use deadly force to stop that intruder. You could hit him with this water bottle. However, if you've got that gun in the locker, you still are justified in using that gun to defend yourself, but you have maybe a fine or suspension with the Department of Commerce Insurance because you had a gun and you were an unarmed officer working as an unarmed officer and you had a firearm. You may have a civil fine or suspension from the Department of Commerce Insurance.
I think it's going to be extremely fact specific too. If you have a situation where you have an unarmed guard, they're obviously not carrying on post, but there's an active shooter at their, say they're working at a business, active shooter to run to their car because they know law enforcement's not going to go and grab that gun and try to act basically protect the other people. Are we going to look at that and say, well, you are now acting as an armed guard on an unarmed post? Potentially. But I think we're going to look at all of the circumstances. If you have someone who's saying, well, no, it was in my desk, it was right here, or it was on my body, then maybe we're going to look to say you were acting as an armed guard, which you're not licensed to do. You don't have registration to do so.
I mean, the reason I keep bringing this up, we've got like 10 or 12 of these bars on Broadway where they're all unarmed inside, but there are lockers where almost every one of them has a firearm, that they have their handgun carry permit, or their armed guard license. They may even have that. They're just not using it in the duty that they're in. But if someone walks in with a gun, I completely expect that they're going to go get in those lockers and get those guns. I'm not really worried about, and I know this sounds bad, the fining part or the punishment part from Commerce and Insurance wouldn't be my biggest fear. My biggest fear would be any good attorney is going to use the ruling of Commerce and Insurance to prove the liability that's going to come to not only the guard but us. So having this existing and using this as the ideology behind it, I don't know. It's a slippery slope fast for us because every Friday and Saturday night down here, I got a couple hundred folks with guns and lockers that stuff happens. They're probably going to go get them.
I think we're probably going to look at two different. One, were you acting as an armed guard, when you were doing that act? Maybe not. Maybe it was outside the scope of your duty as an armed guard. But I think it's also a reason why a bar or another business may want to consider hiring armed guards instead of unarmed guards who happen to have firearms adjacent to their person and adjacent to their post. Because I think that saying we're going to excuse that because you happen to carry it's an interesting issue, but I think it may be one where we're going to look specifically at, were you acting as an armed guard when you should have been unarmed? It's about what you were doing, I think, in that moment. Were you a security guard or not? I think paring down some of the Castle Doctrine, I think that can be helpful to kind of remove some of this, because I don't think we want a security guard running through a list in their head of, okay, can I shoot this person now or can I not shoot? We specifically want to really justify this. Am I going to be acting in self-defense? Is there a risk of this grievous bodily injury or death? That's what we want them to be thinking about, not necessarily all the other, am I justified, not justified. And I think that would protect them in their other situations as well.
I tend to agree with what Jesse just said. I mean, the whole bottom line of this is what I keep saying is the only time you can use a firearm is when that critical moment comes where you are in fear of your life or someone else's. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And then you can use deadly force at that point, whether it's, like Blaze said, an ink pen to the temple, a rolling pin out of the kitchen, or whatever it is. Using a baton or a flashlight up against somebody's head. That is clearly considered deadly force, but that doesn't mean that we armed the unarmed security guard. He just found something, the closest thing he could pick up, and used it. But because he met that threshold where he was in fear of his life or imminent bodily harm. So, I mean, once you reach that point, to Blaze's credit, I don't think it matters whether you use a firearm or a rock or whatever. All right, so we will clean this up, and we'll put as much or as little of this as we need, as we feel necessary to carry this on. This is where I started bringing up Tennessee, state of Tennessee versus Garner. There's nothing really much on here, but I've got facts of the case. I've got those in the notes. I know this is kind of a landmark decision that, everybody used to think, if the bad guy's out there doing something wrong, you can shoot him and stop him. Well, until this came along, maybe so, but when this came along, it caused a screeching halt to, well, we got to look at this now. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So the whole facts of the case is in the note on this particular slide. I don't know how much y'all feel like we need to put in there. It is definitely something that we need to. I think we need to cover it. I think it's important for what we do. So I will take any suggestions that you might want to send me later, but we need to clean that up. Then I have another slide about it, and I got all the notes about it under there. It was something I got off of. I was looking at it off the internet, but it was something that was the state had written. It was something that somebody else had written, and basically it redefined this concept for not just the state of Tennessee, but the entire country. Looked at this case and changed their departmental policies and things like that based on this. So whatever you all think we need to put in here about this, I'm all ears for that. This was another federal take on it. I stated the facts here, and then I put in some stuff about Tennessee. So I got several slides here that just all need to be cleaned up. Yes, Blaze? Oh, I thought you had a question. So I got several slides, and it just needs to be cleaned up. I'd like to know kind of what you all teach and what you think we need to put in here about it. Bring it down to a kind of a nutshell version, maybe one slide, and maybe some notes that we could put in there. So, all right. So, and I don't know that this needs to be here, but at this point, probably after we talk about all the laws and everything, I wanted to get into what happens to you physically, personally, when one of these situations comes up. And so this is where I started talking about the fight or flight response, and kind of defined what that is and what happens. You have a sudden release of some chemicals inside your body, natural chemicals. Your heart rate and blood pressure increases. You sort of begin to become the Incredible Hulk to whatever degree that you have of doing that. You're going to get pale. Your blood's going to be going to different places. It's going to be taking blood away from the surface. That way, if you get cut, scratched, you're not going to bleed very much because all your blood's been diverted. Pupils dilate, so you can see better. But you also get tunnel vision, and we've always trained about that. You may start trembling. So all these things are going to happen when, leading up to you're trying to decide, hey, is this that moment when I'm going to have to use my firearm to defend my life or someone else's? And so I go over that, and then I go in here. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes for the body to calm down and return to normal. And then I just put some stuff up here to be thinking about it. I think it's important when you teach that you make sure that the people are thinking about these things. So during all this stuff, that's all these physiological changes that your body's going through, whether you want to call it scared to death or whatever the reason you're trembling, you're supposed to remember, you're supposed to be following the Force Continuum. You started out at level 1. In about a split second, you may have gone to 5, but you're still trying to figure out, can I de-escalate? I've got this tunnel vision. Is this one adversary? Is it 2 now? Does he have an accomplice? Is there a whole carload of them? What's going on? I've got all these people shopping here in the mall, and I got to protect them. I need to be making notes. I need to know where the offender went. I got to keep my distance because he can come at me in 21 or 31 feet in 1 or 2 seconds, which we hadn't talked about that yet. But so there's a big laundry list of things that you've got to decide that's going to be taking place during all this. So I think it's important that we teach that and talk about that and bring that up in the class. Some people might say, hey, we'll just run, go hide. Some people may do that. Typically, we're not, those of us that are kind of associated with this industry, we're not programmed to do that. We're programmed to go in and go toward where the problem is. And some people may choose to do that. But the question is, what will you do? So I think this slide is a place to get people to thinking, am I capable of doing this? What am I going to do? How am I going to react?
I think one you should add to there, Mr. Winfrey, that does happen and is a reaction is to fight, flight, or you got a third one where people literally freeze up and they remain frozen. So,
and that goes back to that last question that I highlighted there. What will you do? And hey, I was only there once in my career where I thought I was really close to that moment. I don't know what I'd do if it happened on the way home today. I just know what happened back then. And so, you just never know. But it's something you need to think about. Whether you're a concealed carry person or an armed guard or police officer or whatever. So, I got some more, stuff here to talk about. Is this that event? Am I gonna have to resort to the weapon? Am I in fear of my life? Have I reached that stage? Is this guy going to kill me? Remember, he can cover 21 feet in the same time or less than it takes to draw and fire. More questions. What happens if I shoot this person? What happens if I kill him? What happens if I shoot and miss and hit a 5-year-old? What happens if I shoot and hit the 5-year-old? Can I be held criminally or civilly liable? So those are some questions, and I think we need to lay those out in the classroom and get the people to thinking about these things, to understand the seriousness of what they may be undertaking. And then this is a bunch of slides to place to put new stuff in if we need to. And then we went to the second section, B, which is handling the firearm. So my 12 o'clock alarm just went off. I guess the question is, I know some of y'all have come from a long distance. Jack walked over from next door.
We started 30 minutes late.
And we started 30 minutes late, so do y'all want to keep going till about 12:30? Because I think I can. Okay, if that's okay with everybody.
I may have to eat. I've got a doctor's appointment at 1
Okay.
o'clock, which was a long time ago made, so I may,
Okay.
if that won't be a problem, we'll still have the quorum if I do that, correct? So,
Yes.
All right, all right.
And I'll just assign you more stuff, so.
All right.
I'm sorry?
We're planning on voting on
I don't think we're going to vote on anything today because we're not quite ready for that yet, but.
We had a quorum, but I just want to make sure because
Yeah.
Leroy has been here.
And I would like to expedite this and maybe be ready for some kind of vote or be awfully close to a vote when we come to our next meeting, which is.
That's what we need to vote on. We do have it, so we need to vote on our next meeting.
Can I put something forth to the committee for consideration? In the very beginning, when we did these meetings, it was virtually because of the pandemic. We're right back to the place we were before in terms of the pandemic with the dangers of the new variant that's out there. Just throwing it out there for consideration that it might be a lot easier for these folks that are not only coming from other places, but in light of the situation that we're in right now, I'm putting that forth for consideration.
And fortunately, the way that they've now back to the point where we're supposed to be meeting in person. So I think that we can kind of maybe balance that by saying, can we, depending where we are with everything, potentially push the next meeting out a little bit, make sure that we've got everything assigned. So if we do have to meet in person, unless there's another executive order that changes that, if we do have everything done twice or push it out, done, we're voting on it, gotten time to see it. I think that that's the best way.
Is there any way we could have a provision where we could do some progress meetings virtually and to meet those goals and objectives? I'm just trying to, we've been working on this quite a while, and it seems like we're spinning a little bit in my mind.
I think can't necessarily do it as a progress meeting. At the last meeting in January, Farrell had mentioned she was going to take on some things. I think, Angel, you've volunteered. What we could do is have potentially set a meeting for, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, and say in 1 month or in 2 months, Jeff is going to, individual board members are going to, or committee members, individual committee members will contact Jeff, let him know the progress, let him file things, just so that way, and then Jeff can kind of gauge where the progress is with it, and if we are ready to have a meeting, maybe we'll set 2 meeting dates. If we're ready to have that first one, if everything is done, great, we'll go forward. If we're not ready, we'll just go ahead and cancel it, because there's no point in getting together if it's another situation where we may not have a quorum. We know that there are people who are traveling great distances, which we really do appreciate, and our people who travel locally, but just traveling, I know it's a lot. We want to make sure that this is the best presentation we can get together. Let's make sure, though, we're at a situation where it's pretty much all ready.
Put forward to the committee just for
Well, we
consideration.
already have an armed subcommittee.
That's where I was going, Ms. Vest, is maybe we get a little bit more specific as to what those tasks should be and who's going to be completing those tasks between now and the next meeting. I think if we were to spend the rest of the time talking about that, we might be a little bit more productive. That's where I was going.
I'll just say this. I've been a post-certified firearms trainer. The rest of this presentation, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but I've been there and done that, so I don't have much trouble with that. Mr. Ferris submitted some really good stuff for that. I have some really good stuff of my own for that. Blaze submitted some really good stuff for that. The main thing that I needed that I've not gotten is this legal stuff, because I'm used to being law enforcement. I've always just been a law enforcement trainer. So I want to make sure that we tone this specifically to security issues, security guard, armed security. That's what I desperately need to make sure. As you see, I've made several notes here that we need to clean some stuff up. Once we can get that done, then, and the sooner we can get that done, that's what I've been mostly waiting on. And so I just recently started, I just kind of took the bull by the horns and jumped back into it and started working on it. If I can get that, we actually set a meeting date. Of course, we can change it, but we had set one for the 29th of October. And if somebody will volunteer to help me clean this stuff up that we talked
Jeff,
about
since
today.
Since I've got the law enforcement side of it as well, I'd be glad to help you.
Okay. If we can get that cleaned up, I think we can come back here, and of course, I know I can't get Cody to promise she won't be putting files in my box to work, but
Oh, you get more.
if I can get a little bit of reprieve from that, I think I can have a lot of this stuff ready to roll. I'm pretty ambitious about. I think we could be very close to voting on something when we come back here in October. If I can get a little bit of help on this stuff we've gone over today.
I would help.
Okay.
I know I've been.
I mean, I know. I mean, I know y'all got wives and children and pets and things to do, and I know how that is. But if I can get this cleared up, I just want to, and I don't want to just throw something together, just for the sake of saying I got it done. But I would rather do that and miss by a week or so than to put it off to first or middle of 2022, because
Let me also explain to you that we are ready to submit the unarmed exam to administration. So we may be even having a meeting sooner. It just depends on what kind of changes or what they want to talk about, or if anything needs to be changed on that unarmed.
I think in light of what we discussed in the very beginning, Ms. Vest, there's some minor changes in cleaning up that we need to do.
We're going to clean it up first before we send it. Yes, we will.
But I don't think the
ready.
exam is going to change.
Oh, I don't think so, no, but I mean the material. Let me
The
rephrase
presentation
that. The material is going to
may
be
change
sent.
a slide or two,
Yes.
but and
Well, I don't know. Commissioner may not like the way one question's worded and wants to change it to another one during the exam. I don't know. So, but I'm just letting you know we're ready to. Once we get some more housekeeping, we're ready to submit that part. So we would like to have this submitted to the commissioner, the unarmed part, before the end of the year. That's the goal that we've set.
When we started the meeting today, that was the main reason I was asking about the title change and whether that was going to affect the entire presentation. Now that we know it isn't, and we're just going to remove the change it from Private Protective Services Licensing and Regulatory Board, that it's just Private Protective Services. It's a minor change, so thank you.
So you'd like a motion?
Yes, well, I guess we're going to make a motion to meet
29th.
on the 29th. The 29th of October is a Friday, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is that, like 5 weeks from now? 6 weeks from now? Is that ample time?
I can make that motion for the 29th.
What about the time? Do we want to reserve some time in the afternoon, maybe for an hour or two, just in case? That way, if everybody makes the effort to get here, and
Well, we reserved these rooms for the whole day. But when we started the committee, we said we was going to do it from 9 to 12 because you're business people. If we want to extend that longer, yes, we can stay as long as we need to. It's just up to our commission members.
I'm not saying that we'll need that, but we could.
Members.
We could need that. And
Yeah, we can. Got it all day. This is up to who. So maybe next time we need to be prepared to spend a little bit longer time.
maybe go to lunch and then come back for an hour or so just to tie up any loose ends or something, maybe.
Or we can order lunch in.
I'll order lunch. Yeah, we'll donate lunch. I'll make the motion for the 29th, and I'll bring lunch.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for our next committee meeting to be October the 29th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Our next meeting will be October the 29th. Yes, so they all start at 9.
We'll start at 9, and then we'll just reserve the option of, we'll do lunch in, and we'll just reserve the option of, no more than a couple hours in the afternoon. That'll give everybody time to get back to where they need to be.
All right, so are we finished with this portion? Are we finished with our meeting now?
Does anybody have anything? I mean, I know that I sent this stuff out, and you probably didn't have time to look at it, so don't worry about that. But there's no issue with them feedback just directly to me, like.
Right. You are committee members, but you do not speak to other committee members on outside of this meeting. Any material that you're going to send, you send it to Jeff, and then he will compile all of it and bring it in. We don't want to get into the Opens Meeting Act. If there's two of you and you start talking, that's an open meeting. That's why Jeff has to send everything to you individually and doesn't copy all, for instance. That's fine.
Let that scare you to send me stuff I'm asking for.
Would it be possible to have things sent to Jeff by October 15th, and then he can compile it by the 22nd to get that all sent out to everyone?
Yeah.
And then by the 29th, that way everyone can look at it, see if it's ready to be voted on?
And of course, we will be sending this out to all committee members, even if they're not here.
Have them vote that you don't send me a bunch of files to work. I tried.
We got a bigger budget now, I heard, so
I didn't hear that anyway.
it's all in one pot.
Yeah, but it's the same amount.
How much of it can we take from the alarm contractors or whoever?
We're not going to take anything from anybody.
Except for
All
half
right,
of Jeff's
so
check.
I guess as far as that goes, I think we made some good notes here, or I made some notes. I think we made some progress here. Just need to clean up that first part, the laws about, and again, I want to reiterate, I want to make sure that we're covering what we need to cover that's specifically for the security industry. Because back when I was doing what I was doing, I didn't even know we had reg boards and security guards were licensed and what they did. I didn't know that stuff. I was off doing something else. So I just don't feel like I'm not comfortable with a lot of this stuff that you all are teaching, and I just want to make sure we don't leave anything out that's necessary. And one other thing I'd like to recognize Hannah. So Shauna left back a few months ago. When we replaced Shauna, Cody hired Megan Mosley. She was on our staff, and she is now assuming the position that Shauna was in. But she had already scheduled some time off today, so we had Hannah working for us years ago before I came along, and then she left and went to complaints and centralized complaints, and she said there were too many complaints there. I'm not sure what that was all about that. So then she came back to us, and so we now have her back, and so I just wanted to recognize her and let y'all know who she is, and she's here taking the minutes and trying to absorb everything. So we appreciate the job that she's doing.
Okay, we need to go back. Well, I believe I have made a mistake on the vote for the October the 29th. All I got was a motion
I'll
from
second
Jack
it.
Bird. Who
I'll
second?
make the motion to
All
second.
right, let's start all over again.
sorry.
Let's rescind that motion because it did not have a second. So let's start over.
All
again.
right.
Make a motion that we have our next meeting on October the 29th.
I'll second it.
Oh, that's right. Frankie Lax in the second.
Under those same conditions. And
Right.
And a
All right. I need
lunch.
to. Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. So we will now officially have our next meeting on the 29th of October.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
from Frankie Lax to adjourn. Do I have a second?
And a second from Jack Bird.
All right. Got a motion to adjourn by Frankie Lax and a second by Jack Bird. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned at 12:19. You would be surprised how many opposes you get sometime. Okay, adjourn.